Well, hello everybody. My name's Christine Carroll. I'm the Music Program Director here at Excelsia College. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about HSC composition and what's involved. Well, firstly, if you're doing composition for the HSC, there are one of three courses that you're working towards. So it's either Music 1, Music 2, or Music Extension, and the requirements for composition are a little bit different depending on which one of those courses you're doing. So for Music 1, you'll be doing a 4-minute composition which aligns with one of your elective topics. And if you're doing Music 2, you're either doing a core composition which aligns to your mandatory topic, or you're doing an elective composition. The core composition is 2 minutes and the elective composition is 3 minutes. If you're doing a music extension composition, you're going to be doing a 6-minute composition which comprises 2 works and the total performance time is 6 minutes. Now it's really important that you know what the examiners are going to be looking for in your composition, and obviously the end product that you're going to be thinking about the whole time you're doing your composition is the finished product, which is the score and the recording. And it's really important that you know that in terms of what's going to be marked, the score is really the primary authority and the recording is used as a way of the examiners understanding what you've indicated in the score. Well, other than the finished product, obviously you're going to be thinking about some of the assessments that you have to do as well for composition. And primarily that's going to take the form of a composition portfolio, which is a document which is a record of your entire composition process throughout the time that you undertake the HSC composition. So previously, when I was a high school music teacher, some of my students for composition would ask me about the portfolio and say, why do I have to do this portfolio? What's the point of creating this journal? Well, it's there for 2 reasons. Primarily, it's there as a way of proving the authenticity and the originality of your composition. And secondly, it's a way of you documenting the creative process. So professional composers still use portfolios and journaling as a way of them keeping track on their creative process, recording their ideas and evaluating them. And that's really the secondary purpose of the portfolio. Well, you've got to create a composition portfolio. Now, often students are a little bit at a loss as to know what to put in it. So here are some ideas for you. Generally speaking, the best place to start is by looking broadly at the topic or genre of composition that you're going to be composing within. So do a bit of a broad sketch of the topic, do some reading, and most importantly, do as much listening as you can. Listen really broadly within that topic or genre area and expose yourself to the diversity of the style and to a number of different composers or leading artists. After that, you're probably going to be inspired by a couple of key works. And those key works are usually going to be good ways of you informing yourself about some of the composition projects. After you've done that broad listening and made lots of notes in your journal about those listening experiences, what I recommend you do next is to hone in on a couple of key works which are going to be used as a way of you focusing in your ears on the compositional processes involved within those pieces. So once you've chosen those works, listen really carefully to them, access scores, look at multiple versions of the same thing, and do really detailed concept analysis on it, because it's going to unearth for you a range of different tools and compositional techniques which are typical to that genre or style. Along the way, you're going to be thinking about your own ideas as informed by your research and by your listening experiences. And what I would generally say is make sure you document those ideas as you go. So really be thinking about key rhythmic ideas, key melodic ideas, perhaps a harmonic pattern, whatever it might be, instrumentation, a particular groove or riff which you really like. You need to record those ideas and put them in your portfolio. While you're recording those ideas, it may be a good idea to sit with your instrument and use a recording device, even like your phone, in order to record those ideas as you go. As you plot ideas and plan ideas, be thinking about evaluating as you go. So do a little bit of talking, perhaps into the recording device, or perhaps on paper in the form of a journal and evaluate things as you go. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Are there ways that you can improve the idea? How are you going to use the idea within the broader scheme of the composition? Once you've got a couple of ideas that you're happy with, be thinking about how you're going to plan those. So mind mapping is a really good tool for you at this point in planning out the structure of your piece. Where are you going to distribute those ideas? Really be thinking about using them economically within the piece. So you may have perhaps a melodic line, which might later be used in the bass part, or perhaps you've got a rhythmic groove that later is referenced in the melody line. So really be thinking about how you can tie these different ideas together and use them economically. The final product obviously is the finished score and the recording. So as you go, be working on your score, be using a notation program I would recommend, and such as MuseScore or perhaps Sibelius, whatever your teacher has recommended to you, and be doing save as drafts of that composition scoring process. And if you save as you go and include those different dated versions in your portfolio, you'll never be at a loss of the composition process and documenting it at the end of the journaling process. Often there are some compositional pitfalls that students can fall into, and so I'm going to outline some of those now for you. And I think that this may be very helpful because it's a really common story to get stuck and to get a bit frustrated along the way. So here's some tips for you. Well, firstly, with your composition, don't feel like you need to have too many ideas. So a composition which has too many ideas in it will be quite difficult for the listener to listen to because there's so much change and there's so much variation in it. It can be hard for the listener to keep track of the ideas as you go. So don't feel like you need to plan too many ideas. Use them economically, as I said before. Alternatively, students sometimes get stuck because they feel like they don't have enough ideas. Often that's going to be as a consequence of the fact that you haven't listened carefully enough and broadly enough at the beginning of the process. So go back to the beginning of the journaling process and listen a little bit more broadly to a number of different contrasting works and see if you can open up your ears to new ideas. Another pitfall that students sometimes fall into is not having enough ideas for their composition. There's literally too much repetition in the piece. And this is a real temptation when working with a computer program where it's very, very easy to copy and paste ideas. So really be thinking about broadening your listening awareness, going back to that initial process of listening and analysing works and thinking about how you can maybe be a little bit more creative, take a few more risks with generating some original ideas from that initial process. Another problem that students often fall into is they've sat down to do their composition at a computer and they've generated a beautiful score, but they haven't necessarily checked in with players of those instrumental parts to make sure that the music is playable on those instruments. So make sure you do your research, check the range of the instruments that you're writing for. Wherever possible, make sure that you approach a player of those instruments and get them to have a go at playing the music that you've written so that you can hear it on a real instrument. Because there may be things which you've written which are just technically too challenging to play. So do that kind of preliminary research and make modifications as you go. Another pitfall that students fall into is poor scoring. So really have a look at some professional scores within the genre that you're working to and have a look at the layout. Make sure there's all of the performance details there on your score. Dynamics, pedal marks for piano players, breath marks and articulation mark for winds. Whatever it is that you're writing for, if it's electronic instruments and you're using any particular effects on those sounds, make sure you're really specific about that. Because remember again, it's the score which is the authority in the marking process. So provide all of the details you can there for your players. Another problem that students often fall into is that their composition is literally a parody of an existing work. They really have been a little bit of a copycat in taking somebody else's ideas and turning them off as their own. So think very carefully about, again, broadening your listening awareness and making sure that you're taking enough creative risks on your own to make sure that your work is original and not a pastiche copy of somebody else's. Lastly, be practical. Stick to the time limit and remember that you've got to work within it. Well, the last thing I want to mention today is how to manage the project. A lot of students get really stressed during the HSC, and that's very understandable. But sometimes a lot of the stress can be taken out if you just figure out some very practical ways to manage the project. And writing a composition is about managing the realisation of a project. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing that I would be recommending that you do is you stick to a diary, look at when the thing is due in, and then plot backwards weekly internal deadlines that you're going to work towards in order to make sure that that end deadline is going to be achievable for you. So create a timeline and then work backwards from that end goal so that you can manage the project successfully. The second thing that I'm going to talk to you about is making sure that you keep on top of your composition portfolio. Often it's a really big temptation when you're focusing on that end goal of finishing the piece to neglect your portfolio. But the last thing you want to be doing the night before your composition is due is updating that portfolio, which happens to be due the next day. Just make weekly entries into your portfolio and you will really thank yourself for it at the end. The third thing is communicate with your teacher and give them weekly updates about how your composition project is going. When they give you feedback on your work, make sure you incorporate it into your process. When you get stuck, and you frequently will, don't give up. The biggest temptation with composition is to get frustrated with your composing and give in to the temptation of throwing out the whole piece. This is rarely a good idea in my experience. Where there are problems, figure out why there are problems, solve those problems, and what you will end up with as a consequence of that is a much more interesting piece. Lastly, seek advice with scoring if you need it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that's been helpful. If you're interested to find out more about what we do here in the music department at Excelsia College, have a look at our website. We have open days coming up where you can have a look at all of the programs that we offer here. And if you'd like to secure a place here before your HSC finals, we have an early offer program for you to do so.